All right, welcome into the Illini Audible Podcast. My name is Saeed Bravo. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the pod. As always, I really appreciate it. And today we are talking Illini basketball as we have throughout a decent portion of this year with this podcast. And today, making his Illini Audible Podcast debut is my good friend Elliot Casey, my good friend and colleague from the Champagne Room, covers Illini men's basketball with me. We were actually both at the disappointing Wisconsin or quarterfinal game of the Big Ten tournament. And yeah, how are you doing, Elliot?
I'm good. I'm glad to be making my first appearance. I think it was last month I made my first appearance on Illini Drive, WPGU, Cooper O'Kelly's basketball talk show. We previewed the Michigan game a bit. But this is my first time doing more of an unpacking podcast, talking about what we saw and what we need to see going forward. So I'm excited.
We love to see it. Obviously, I've made a couple appearances on that radio show as well. It's good to see us all convene and just talk about everything that's been going on. Obviously, a lot to break down, a lot to talk about with this basketball team and everything and all the turbulence, everything that has happened ever since the last time I was on the air or I was on this podcast talking about this team. So let's just dive right into it. Obviously, on Sunday, yesterday, we saw the selection show. We saw where Illinois lands in terms of where it's going to play in the first round of the tournament. And that, of course, being they're going to play UPenn, Fran McCaffrey, the head coach over at Penn, and obviously the former Iowa coach, Brad Underwood, has dominated that matchup, when it comes to coach. But obviously, it's tournament time now. It's do or die. And we don't really know. Like, anything could really happen inside of a tournament and just the variance of a single elimination tournament. So what was your reaction when you got news that Illinois would head to Greenville, South Carolina to take on this Penn State team, this Penn team?
Yeah, so obviously us being a 3 seed instead of a 2 seed hurts with the fact that we're playing in South Carolina. Not going to see as many Illinois fans as we would have, but I thought about it for a second. I mean, our road record was unbelievable this year, so maybe it's not the worst thing in the world that we're playing in South Carolina. As for the draw against Penn, on Twitter, actually, I saw right before Selection Sunday, I saw somebody say, "Oh, the worst scenario would be if we draw Fran McCaffrey's Penn." And it's not because it's Penn. It's because it's a Fran McCaffrey coach team, a Big Ten team that Underwood has faced off against millions of times in his career. And Underwood knows that Fran's going to come into this game with some competitive spirit, and he's going to bring his star guard TJ Power out to try to make something happen. He just finished with 44 points and 14 rebounds in the match in the Ivy League championship against Yale the other day. So that's definitely going to be something to watch out for. TJ Power is just an unbelievable player. He has experience at the highest level in the ACC at schools like Duke and Virginia. And yeah, Fran McCaffrey, he's got years and years of Big Ten experience. So he's clearly a great coach, and he's got a good squad coming to play some basketball against the Illini. One good thing for the Illini, not necessarily good, wouldn't say good, but fortunate for the Illini is that Ethan Roberts probably will be out with a concussion. So we'll see how much of the load Power can take. He shot 14 of 26 from the floor, including 7 of 14 from three-point range and 9 of 9 from the free throw line against Yale. So we'll see how much he can do. But 14 seed for the Illini, and I think, like Underwood has said millions of times, can't underestimate any team when it comes to March.
That's right. And you never want to see a player get injured, but obviously when it comes to the single elimination tournament, that's certainly something that's always going to be a factor that you might feel encouraged about when it comes to it being a team that you have a vested interest in. Illinois, of course, 8-2 on the road this year. And so that's obviously encouraging. And the biggest thing for this team coming in is to clear its head, right? That's something that we got insight about in terms of when we get. I went into the locker room after that Wisconsin. I was, we'll talk about that in a bit, but the clearing of the heads and obviously the time that the time that it's going to take for this team to do it, it's going to allow it hopefully because they played on Friday. The next time they play is going to be this Thursday. So that's what 6 days of break. So then you have certainly time to recover yourself. Obviously, you mentioned TJ Powers being a hell of a player, but there's a reason why Penn is, a lower seed. And you certainly feel like that Penn team is not going to have as many bigs and just not the size that Illinois has. So certainly, obviously, first round of the tournament is always going to feel like a favorable matchup. But specifically Penn, it should be a team that you are able to dominate on the paint.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we will see after the first couple rounds unfold is how skilled the Big Ten really is this year. I think maybe even after just the first round, we could potentially see a lot of Big Ten blowouts because these Big Ten teams have been playing among the best of the best all season and gotten so used to playing the best of the best all season, having a competitor with such a pulse every week. But now in March against these round of 64 teams, you can't, like you said, you can't let that mental lapse take over. You can't give them a chance to find that spirit and find that power to come back. And I think they know that. I think Underwood has kind of instilled that energy into them because losing so many of these tough games to Big Ten competitors, it's got to get them in the right mentality to not let that happen against a non-Big Ten competitor. So, I mean, I think the spread opened at something like 20 points, and we'll see if that's accurate. But like you said, I do think that the Illini, although this is a Fran McCaffrey coach team and it's a great coach team with a great TJ Power guard, I still think the Illini should walk away with this one pretty comfortably.
That's right. 9. You talk about the Big Ten being just an absolutely force in basketball, in college basketball. That is 9 Big Ten teams made the tournament this year. That is certainly something that if you're a team in that conference, especially if you're an upper echelon part of that conversation in the Big Ten, you certainly feel good about that. And you certainly feel like, although Illinois hasn't been what it, felt like it was early in the season and specifically in January, it still speaks to the level of competition that they've had. But with that being said, let's dive into what both of us really witnessed at the United Center. We were both there on Friday for Illinois' just awful loss against Wisconsin. And there were certainly a lot of takeaways things to take away from that game. But in the first crack of postseason play that Illinois had, it was certainly not encouraging to see that Illinois now finds itself 0-5 in the last 5 quad-going games and 0-4 in the last 4 overtime games. Which the four games that they have played overtime, they've lost all of them. And so I guess, what was your reaction? I'm sure we all had similar reaction as to what we were witnessing, but what was your biggest takeaway from that game? Coming just the total ending that it had. 2 different points. Illinois had a 15-point lead, and they just couldn't close out the game.
Yeah, I mean, big picture takeaway from that game probably is that this team is so confident in their ability, but they can't let their confidence levels get that high. I think this team knows how good they are on offense. They know that they're the highest rated offensive efficiency team in KenPom history. And they went up 33-10 on UCLA, and right at that point when they got complacent, when they thought it was easy, and they dropped their guard. They just can't let that happen in March. I think it also, though, is a testament to how good this team really is, because I thought about it from a different perspective after the Wisconsin game. If we had never gotten that 15-point lead, the complacency would have never been a thing. So if it really was a close game the entire time, there's a chance that the offense and the defense both keeps that fire mentally going, that physicality going. But yeah, again, the main takeaway is just that they can't drop their guard at the worst time. They have to stay mentally focused. And Underwood mentioned how he also has to do better in those moments to keep them mentally focused. But I think it's a balance of both. I think Underwood has to keep them focused in that way, but I also think these players, a lot of them are inexperienced. I mean, although they're insanely mature freshmen, you got two starting freshmen in the starting five with Merkovich and Wagler. But yeah, I think as time goes on, as this roster experiences more and more heartbreak, I think that's something that will become more aware to them, and that's something that Underwood will continue to help them gain that mentality.
That's interesting. That is an interesting perspective that you have, because the thing with this kind of, for me, is the concerning thing is that this is now it is totally a pattern. And so, yeah, you could sit there and say that, while maybe if the game unfolded differently, Illinois would have been able to, maybe you just can't design that kind of game plan is the biggest thing about that. And that's, you would hope that maybe in that scenario, then you would hope that Illinois plays it really close. It's always really close. And then until the final 2-3 minutes where Illinois' offense just separates itself from Wisconsin or from whatever team it's playing for that matter. The biggest thing, though, is that they haven't been able to do that. They haven't been able to close out games really since I don't really know when, but I would have to say maybe even the Purdue game, when they totally, and that was on the back of a historic performance that they had from Keaton Wagler. So that's, to me, is my biggest takeaway, is the lack of focus that this team seems to have. It is very concerning, because obviously the young guys, like, maybe they get a little bit more leeway when it comes to that. But when you have your leaders who are supposed to be there to be the leading voices, and for Illinois, that's supposed to be a guy like Jake Davis, a guy like Kylan Boswell, a guy like Tomislav Ivicic, who's supposed to be the vocal leader. Even Ben Humrichhaus is supposed to be considered that vocal leader to kind of calm everyone and put everyone in their place. But so far, you just haven't seen enough of that in these high leverage games, in these quad one games, specifically the 5 quad one games that they've had in the last 5 quad one games. That is a concerning trend. And a lot of that, which we can also talk about, is because of the defense. Just how bad the defense has been, especially against guards that have been playing them really well, like Nick Void, like Nick Void and John Blackwell, who have just been tearing up the Illini, which is the concerning part to me. And I don't know how you feel about this, Elliot, but if you get a bad matchup in the NCAA tournament where you have a couple guards that can put up a lot of points on that kind of defense, and that's where the concerns grow for me.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a good point there, but I did want to say something, because I did think this Illinois defense in the first half was capable of taking care of those two guys, and they were. I think Boyd, finished with 9 points. Blackwell had 10 at the end of the first half, and that's 20 minutes of basketball that you just took care of two insanely talented guards. But the change wasn't Boyd and Blackwell becoming all of a sudden having that and finding that energy to spark a comeback. I think it maybe a little bit of that, but most of it was Illinois becoming complacent on defense, like you said. And I wanted to highlight a stat. Wisconsin shot 10 of 41 from field goal range, 10 of 41 from 3-point land in the win over Illinois. That's 24% in the win over Illinois. That's the only game Wisconsin has won all year versus a team above 500 where they shot under 33% from deep. So it's not like Boyd and Blackwell were making it rain. Both of them were having their struggles from 3-point land. And as most people know, that's where most of their game lives. I felt like it was more once they realized that their shots weren't going down, that's when they started taking it to the hoop. And combined with us being a little too complacent, playing a little bit too loose at that point in time, Boyd finished with in the two matchups that Boyd played Illinois, one in Champaign, one at the United Center. He has 69 points combined on 37 shots. And in just the game in Chicago, Wisconsin outscored Illinois 25-9 on free throws. 18 free throws in the second half, 10 in overtime for Wisconsin. So all of those stats point to, number one, the second half complacency and the defensive lapses, lack of focus. And number two, it points to self-inflicted losses. I think this was yet another self-inflicted loss for the Illini. I go through all of the, 8 games it is that the Illini have lost, and I can find 2 where I think they didn't have a chance. I think 6 losses were self-inflicted out of the Illini's 8 losses. I think they had no chance in the Michigan game, and they had no chance in the UConn game. Every other loss, the Alabama one, lost because it didn't make their free throws. Michigan State, I think it was 1 rebound. We needed 1 defensive stop. UCLA, obviously, a complete collapse. Wisconsin, back in Champaign, another complete collapse. What else we got?
UCLA.
UCLA, yeah, we said that. Maryland, I missed a couple, but you get the big picture here. The picture is that when they start succeeding on offense, they start getting lazy on the other side. And then once they get lazy on the other side, they allow the other team to build momentum. Once the other team builds momentum, they start becoming stagnant on the offensive side and continue to be stagnant on every other side of the court. So, because it felt like when we're making shots, the energy is there, but at the same time, it feels like when we're making shots, to a certain extent, the energy dies at a point when they feel like they have won the game. And I just, there has to be a solution, whether it's Brad in a timeout, whether it's the players huddling up and talking to each other saying, all right, guys, we got to keep this going. We can't let this happen. I mean, I felt like at the United Center, there should have been a point, maybe when the lead got cut down to single digits, there should have been a timeout called. There should have been a game plan change. Something had to change, because it felt like that run that Wisconsin just started, it just kept on going and never ended. And I feel like there has to have been something that they could have done to halt that run from Wisconsin.
No question. And to me, one of the things that I thought should have kept going, a trend that I saw in the first half that did not continue in the second, was the usage of Andrej Stojakovic, encouraging him to continue to drive into the rim. Admittedly, he does get plenty of tunnel vision. I mean, there's been times in high leverage situations where, specifically comes to mind for me, is the Michigan game in Champaign, where the guy just got tunnel vision and you just didn't see anything. You just didn't see anything that was encouraging from him. Just a player that you invested a lot in, and you just don't really get much. But right now, it feels like he's a confident Stojakovic, and a confident Stojakovic that's able to drive into the rim is something that this team certainly needs, specifically when the threes aren't falling. And obviously the threes did not fall in the totality of the game. Early on they were, but later on, as the game continued to unfold, you didn't see that trend continue. And that's when you need your point guards, your guards, to drive into the rim, and you need your bigs to be there to see if they can get a rebound in those situations. And that's another point that Underwood has talked about extensively as well, as a guy who can, quote unquote, give a damn, a guy who can bring in the nasty. And that's something that we've heard for a couple weeks now. And that, to me, once again, is another concerning trend that cannot be ignored, because when you have your coach talking about it, it should feel like at some point someone takes the ball, grabs the ball by the horns and decides it's going to be him. And so far, you just haven't seen that. And I was going to say, right, to one of my other takeaways, that it felt like, specifically in the immediate locker room session, that we were able to, because in the Big Ten, in the Big Ten tournament, rather, we are able to have locker room access. One of the best parts of postseason play. One of the best things is you get a wider lens into, what exactly broke down. And it felt to me like, besides AJ Redd, Underwood, and Kylan Boswell, there were really, really not that many guys who had answers for why seems to be a lack of focus in not just this game, but several games that you mentioned, the UCLA game, the game that they lost, the Michigan game you wouldn't say, but the earlier Wisconsin loss, the Michigan State loss that they had, just all those games where they've lost close ones, and you felt like they could have had a chance to win those games, and a lot of the guys just felt like they don't know why. Uh, they wish they knew what they could do differently. I sensed a lot of frustration from Jovanovic Ivicic because he had a relatively good game, especially in that first half, and he felt just frustrated, and not frustration because they just don't know what it was that led to that lack of focus. He said, whatever it is, I mean, we're gonna have to figure it out, and you know, see what focus on every detail and see exactly where the end. So now they're searching for answers, and yeah, AJ Red told me that he echoed your sentiment is, which is they feel comfortable shooting. They see that basket go, and you gain a lead, and you just get comfortable, and you can't let up. And that's something that is once again concerning Ivicic. Tomislav Ivicic told me that he doesn't know. They're gonna have to go through the game film. I'm sure at this point they do know what exactly. You would hope that at this point they do know what exactly it was that led to that, whether it be emotional or whatever. Merkovich had the same message, same thing, where it was, "Hey, I wish I knew. If I knew, then I'd want to fix it right now. I'd be able to fix it right now." And you just got that echo to the message. Jake Davis, another guy that felt like maybe it wasn't even just that maybe just Wisconsin. His theory was that Wisconsin was just really, really good that day. And Nick Voigt and John Blackwell were just excellent. And when you have a player like that, you can't stop him. But I feel like, and obviously I feel like fans would argue that those really aren't satisfactory enough answers, especially for what the standard has been here in Champaign and how things have unfolded, specifically in the last couple of weeks in the quad one games.
Yeah.
One
So
quote that go ahead.
sorry, Said. I mean, you brought up a lot of good points there. But a couple of things kind of sparked my mind here. I think you're entirely right about the mental focus, the complacency, but a big picture when you look at the stats and what that leads to, I think the most important stats that this team lacks when they lack focus is rebounding, like we spoke about a little bit, offensive rebounding and defensive rebounding, and secondly is defense as a whole. And here I pulled a quote from Wisconsin head coach Greg Gard after the loss. Greg Gard said, "A lot of rebounding is what's underneath your hood, meaning inside of you, your grit, your toughness. You can rebound against size if you continue to have the fight in you." And I think that's a very, very important quote here because Illini has one of the tallest rosters in the nation, if not the tallest. So that should speak to their rebounding ability. And I think Underwood needs to just do it. I don't know if it's Underwood. Underwood said, here's a quote from Underwood. He said, "Our offensive rebound effort, no matter how much we work on it in practice, somehow it's not carrying over right now. I don't know what they have to do, but somehow, some way, that needs to be instilled into the players' minds. That rebounding and defense is not an option, no matter how many points you are up." And it's a mix of the complacency and the focus leading to that. But you touched on Stojakovic, and I want to talk about him real quick, and I also want to talk about the Ivicic twins. But Stojakovic, he acted as a release valve for the Illini in the first half because we were shooting okay from the three. Okay, nothing too special, but nothing like a number one offense. And Stojakovic in the first half had the confidence to take it to the hoop against smaller guys and make it happen. He finished with 17 points and 7 rebounds. His rebounding and defensive efforts continue to improve. I think the Oregon game was a wake-up call for him after the Michigan performance. And he just needs to keep that fire going. But you know what I would have loved to see from Stojakovic in the second half is him taking that authority in the team when they were chucking up threes, panicking, I would like to see him taking that authority and driving it to the hoop because he has the athleticism to do that. He has the ability to do that. And when he takes it to the hoop, normally he'll score against most teams, maybe not against Merez Johnson Jr. He had a bad game then because his number one game is taking it to the rim. And Michigan's best part on the defensive side is with Mara and Merez protecting the rim. So I think that game specifically was more matchup based, but I would have loved to see Stojakovic continue taking authority in the second half. And I think the reason why he didn't is because the entirety of the momentum of the game, the way it was going, everybody was starting to get down on themselves and everybody was starting to lose confidence. The entire offense was starting to lose confidence. But I think, like he said in the post-game press conference, they just need to continue sharing the ball. They can't chuck up threes when it gets hard. And you know, when they're missing rebounds and not playing defense, I feel like that leads to them chucking up shots. And I think there needs to be more than one or two players on this team who can take initiative and make the right decision on offense without rushing it, trying to get themselves back in the lead. It feels like whenever a lead starts shrinking for the Illini, it's like there's no chance to even come back. It's like there needs to be a point where once the lead starts shrinking, you fix it and you turn that around. But it feels like as soon as the lead starts shrinking, there's nothing the Illini can do to save it.
Yeah, and you do mention the Andrei Stojakovic point, and in the second half, Illinois was shooting 4 for 11 for 3-point, and obviously you can't just keep, like you said, chucking up shots. I would have liked to have seen more Zvonimir Ivicic in that second half. He only got 8 minutes, and then overtime he only got 1 minute. And I
in the
do
first
feel
half,
like he was playing pretty well in the first half.
He was playing really well in the first half. I think he had maybe 5.6 rebounds in the first half. But for a guy who normally comes off the bench and his duty is to block shots, I mean, he did have a real impact on that game. He was snagging boards. He was protecting the rim, and he knocked down one of his 5 threes. That's the next point I was going to talk about. I think the Illini really need to figure out what they are going to do with the Ivicic twins, because Tomislav, his main game last year was pick and roll, pop the 3, and he was insanely efficient with that pick and pop, and I think Kasparis did a great job feeding him with that. But for Tomislav this year, I feel like it's a mix of not having as much of a role in the offense, since we have guys like Keaton Stojakovic and Kylan and whatnot. Now Jake Davis is starting. You know, that's taking his opportunity to knock down some shots. But also when he gets those 3-point opportunities, he's not knocking them down. I have a couple stats here. Ivicic, he is 6 for 33 from 3-point range in his last 7 games. Now Zvonimir is 3 for 24 from 3 in his last 9. So neither of them are shooting well from the triple. But when neither of them are shooting well from the triple, which one has more of an impact on the court? And in my opinion, I would probably say Big Z, because of what he does on the defensive side and his ability to flush down a jam. I mean, I feel like every time I see him in the game, he's finishing off the end of an alley-oop and putting it in the rim. I feel Tomislav isn't as aggressive when it comes to scoring down in the low block. Zvonimir doesn't necessarily post up players, but he'll get you a dunk here and there. I think both of them need to be better at rebounding with their length. You know, I'm sure Fletch has been in the weight room with both of them. Both of them put on immense amounts of weight, but I think they just need to find that fire within them to kind of do basically exactly what that quote said from Greg Gard, which is you need to have the toughness and the grit to go snag a rebound. I mean, I've played pickup basketball before, and when I try my hardest and I jump as high as I can make it hard for a guy who's way taller than me to snag a rebound. And I think that's just what they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure pickup basketball doesn't really translate all too well. This was me yesterday. I was playing some pickup basketball, totally demolished, really humbled me. But I mean, despite that, you do bring a good point. Like, genuinely do. Like Tomislav Ivicic, only 2 rebounds. I mean, how is it possible that Andrei Stojakovic had 7 in the game, and most of them actually came in in through the first half, which, just speaks to how good of a first half he was having at that point. But yeah, like Underwood has been talking about the guy who can, give a damn and stuff like that. And it certainly feels like it should be Tommy, because he was that guy last year. And obviously things are different this year. But when you're dealing with a guy with going through just a big slump, it's certainly something that you hope that the switch can flip. But this tournament is so much about momentum, and going into playing this tournament, who's got the momentum, who can go and rattle off wins. If you had to compare this tournament style to the most, like, if you had to compare this tournament style to what is the most similar format in any of the other major sports leagues, you would say Major League Baseball. And we all know that in Major League Baseball, when you get to the playoffs, it's not about, the record doesn't matter anymore, unless you're Dodgers. The record doesn't matter anymore. But what it matters is that you're hot going into October, and then you can rattle off a bunch of series wins, and that's how you win a World Series. It's the same thing here. Maybe not to the best extent, because it's 64 teams, but to a certain extent, it is the same. And you don't feel all that encouraged when it comes to this particular Illini team, because they were undefeated back in January, and it's so difficult to imagine the fact that this team would end up. We would be having these kinds of conversations at this point in the year, when it certainly felt like at the start in late January that this was going to be a team that you would have to look out for, and you would certainly have to feel encouraged about, and that you were talking about this Underwood team, this team being Underwood's probably best team in his whole tenure. I do want to bring up one other guy, though. That's Keaton Wagler. Before the Big Ten tournament, we had media availability with him, and he even acknowledged at one point that, one of his weaknesses is that maybe at some point he's maybe too unselfish, and that's something that is a con against him. That's maybe something that'll go against him in the scouting report. And there were certainly times in that game where he didn't get called. I thought the refs, I don't know what you probably would agree, but the refs just weren't calling all that many. He just wasn't getting all that many calls, even though he was getting fouled. And you saw him struggle in the kind of struggle in the second half. But my question to you is Keaton Wagler too unselfish? Because I certainly feel like he has been. And, maybe not all of it is his fault, because of the fact that he just does not get calls.
Yeah, with Keaton, I think it's a mix. It's a mix of things. Ever since the Purdue game, teams have been picking him up like crazy because they know what he's capable of. So, he'll get pressed full court. He'll get double teamed here and there. And I think that is something that he is still getting used to. I think, yes, he is still too unselfish at this point in the season, now that he is seen back-to-back games where teams are going for him on the scouting report. But I think there has to be a point where he manages to realize that even though he's getting double teamed and getting pressed full court, there's a reason why he is, because of what he can do on the court for this Illini team. And I think when he gets double teamed and when he gets pressed full court, he reverts to sharing the ball. He is an incredibly intelligent point guard when it comes to finding the next pass. So I think when in recent games, when they've pressed him like they have, he's just managed to find the next pass, and his teammates just haven't done the best job of knocking that next shot down. So when something like that's happening in March, I think he needs to just realize that, okay, if I find the next pass and Tommy isn't nailing his three, then you know what? I'm just going to have to find out a way to split the defense and go score a bucket, even though there's 2-3 guys on me, because he showed what he's capable of in that Purdue game. And that Purdue game was one of the only games this season where he didn't show a single hint of unselfishness. He said, this is my game. I'm going to do it now. And he was pulling up from the logo and hitting threes. But like at the same time, he probably could pull a logo three at the United Center against Wisconsin if he wanted to. He probably did have that opportunity. He just didn't feel the confidence to do it. And he didn't take initiative like he did in many other games. But again, he's a freshman. with all this talent, and you don't expect him to be the player that make or breaks your March team. He's a freshman. I mean, coming into this season, people didn't even know his name,
Yeah.
and now it's like, oh, we lost because of him. Like, no, I don't think it is we lost because of him. I
Yeah.
think we are so incredibly lucky to have a freshman with this much talent on our roster. And like you said, I think Illini fans and Underwood and everybody in the program cuts him a little bit more slack because he's a young freshman who's incredibly intelligent. But yeah, I mean, I think with Keaton, he could definitely help the Illini make a run in March if he flips the switch and turns on that I'm him mode.
He certainly hasn't been what he was like back in January, just simply shooting wise. He hasn't been as good of a shooter, but I think this is a guy that you came in, once you realized what he was, is a guy that raises your ceiling a ton. And so you hope that he can make that flip of a switch. Like I said, the momentum part of it is the most concerning part. But that to me is certainly one thing to note. But yeah, I think you and me are both in agreement that this is a guy who you do cut a little bit of slack because of the element of him being a freshman first time season. Keep in mind, this is the longest season that I mean, probably him and Merkovich have ever played. So that's something to take into account. This is the longest stretch of basketball that they've been playing when it comes to competitive regular season / postseason basketball. Because obviously these guys play year round, but that in this particular stretch, I mean, I can't imagine how much of a physical toll that there's been. Obviously, you have trainers and stuff, all the latest technology and all that, but it's still something to keep in mind. Plus, these are 18, 19-year-old guys. Like that's something to keep in mind as well. I also do think that Wagler needs to put on more muscle, and that's something that'll come for him. It'll be something that he'll probably have to discuss with his people on his camp. But yeah, I mean, I do have just kind of a couple questions here to end this episode of this podcast. My first question is, and this is for both of us. I mean, who do you feel best about going into this tournament?
It's an easy answer for me, honestly.
Okay, then go ahead.
I mean, I would say Merkovich just because he is one of the not, I wouldn't say only players, but he's one of the most notable players on the roster who never loses that competitive spirit, who never loses that, he doesn't never have a mental lapse, but he has probably the least mental lapses on the team when it comes to mentality of saving a game. I mean, sure, he'll have a turnover here and there, a freshman mistake, but that's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is he's one of those players who, Brad said this in the media availability, I think after the selection Sunday yesterday. He said he's the type of guy that sends Underwood a text after a game and takes the blame for everybody. And his competitive fire hurts him, Underwood quoted. And I think it's something that has been on display with Merck, because every game, whether he's shooting from the three or not, he finds ways to score in the low post. He uses that Jokic elbow jumper, that hook shot, whatever it may be. He'll find a way to put the ball in the hoop and help his team. And secondly, I feel like his rebounding efforts are just like there's nobody on this team who goes and grabs a rebound as hard as Merck does. Maybe Keaton is the other guy who goes for rebounds as much as Merck does, but I feel like it's been game after game after game after game where you check the box score and you see over 8 rebounds under Merck's name every single game. And usually he'll have over 15 points most of the time. And I think that consistency is something that this roster can't take advantage of, because I feel like specifically this roster, you have guys who some days they'll go for 15 points, some days they'll go for 0, some days they'll go for 15 rebounds, some days they'll go for 0. Merkovich is one of our most consistent players who will take a bullet for anybody and who is on his team in front of him.
It's certainly exciting to think about the prospect of him returning next season, if that is something that is in the cards. Obviously, we won't know until we get there, but I do think that's certainly encouraging. I was actually going to say the same guy, so I'll kind of flip it on myself. I think the guy they're going to need the most out of going into this tournament is going to be Andrei Stojakovic, simply because, and I was encouraged by what he did in that first half. I just hope that he is going to be put in a position where he can be that guy to kind of elevate that team when it needs it. And that's to me, it's the guy that has to go in the rim and also be a defensive presence and hopefully be that defensive presence, not only when he's the really perimeter guard on the floor, but also alongside Kylan Boswell. That's going to be important. Just to end this podcast, I'm going to try to make this short. So how far do you think this team will actually go in this tournament? Because I have my, obviously this is a variance tournament. It's a one and done, do or die situation. I mean, to me, it is favorable, the draw that they had going into this tournament. It ended up being a 3 seed when they could have been a 2 seed going to St. Louis. Instead, they're now in Greenville going to face Penn. But I do think this is a team specifically because of North Carolina, that the prospect of playing North Carolina or even VCU, that you could see this team going into the second weekend. What's your take on it?
Yeah. North Carolina, I think, like you said, I think we got pretty lucky with that draw simply because since Caleb Wilson's injury, North Carolina have been not playing to their level of caliber basketball. And I think honestly, if VCU ends up upsetting North Carolina, I think that would be something to watch out for the Illini. VCU are one of the other teams in the nation, including the Illini, who I think have 5 double-digit scores. Could be wrong, might be 4, but I know that they are a team with a lot of depth. So if they somehow end up taking down North Carolina, that could be something to watch out for the Illini. But my predictions, it could go either way. But if the Illini end up beating Penn and beating North Carolina or VCU, they will most likely get matched up with number 2 seed Houston. And that game will be, I'm not sure, but I think that game might be in Houston. I could be completely wrong, but I think
it would be in Houston.
Yeah, so that honestly excites me because, like we said, this road team is unbelievable. I mean, like, this team, sure, it was a while ago, and this is a completely different Illini roster at this time, but this was a team that nobody thought they could go into Mackey and beat Purdue when they did. So who knows? Maybe the away crowd will fuel them. Sorry, home crowd. Maybe the home crowd will fuel them and give them a reason to have that competitive spirit and fight. Maybe that's what they need to find that mental focus throughout the entire game. Maybe a home crowd that is booing them the entire game. Then they feel like the villain. Then they feel like the bad guy, and then they maybe go and make something happen. So if they can beat that Houston team, which I think is very possible, they would most likely get matched up against Florida. And I think that Florida game would probably be almost identical to the scrimmage earlier in the year. It was a very, very high scoring game. I think we lost by 5 or 10 to Florida. But that was an unbelievable scrimmage. And I think I could see the Illini stopping their run right there to Florida. And Florida would end up taking the Final Four spot. But yeah, that's my predictions for Illini and March Madness.
So certainly an encouraging prediction by you, Elliot. And I don't necessarily feel the same way. While I do think an away crowd could fuel an Illinois team that has found itself playing much better on the road this season. Of course, I mentioned earlier, 8-2 on the road. I do think that there is that geographical advantage for that home team. Whatever, let's say Houston does end up in that position where they do face Illinois in the second weekend of the tournament. We'll see how that all kind of unfolds. I do think that Illinois, though, can rattle off at least 2 wins in this tournament. Depends, right? Anything can happen. We already talked. I do think that they can beat Penn. And whoever it is, whether it's North Carolina or VCU, in the following round, I do feel optimistic about them being able to win those first 2 games. And this team is just too talented and has learned so much, is probably much more informed about their weaknesses and their mental lapses over the course of the last couple months, this team is too talented to not reevaluate themselves. And something else that's been encouraging about them is that they did have their meeting, which we didn't really talk about, but they did have their home meeting, or their Kylan Boswell got everyone to his place, and they all talked about what they have to do to get back on track. The player only meeting, which is something that you kind of have to revert to. You kind of have to lean on those certain things, the intangibles, when it comes to that, because this is do or die now. This is where the legacy is made. Tomislav Ivic said to me a couple days ago in Chicago at the UC, no one's gonna remember the Big Ten tournament and how that all ended if they do play well in the NCAA tournament. And you hope, if you're Illinois, you hope that they do. So we'll see how that all kind of unfolds over the next couple of weeks, over the next, really, this upcoming weekend. But Elliot, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. I know we had kind of a technical difficulty issue here in the last couple minutes of this pod. We're really looking forward to how this all unfolds. It'll be fun regardless. A lot to take away in the next couple of days. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the pod. As always, I really, really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.